I mean this in the nicest way possible. Choose yourself. This is I Mean This in the Nicest Way Possible, and I'm your host, Ram. Let that land. I'm not talking about abandoning everyone in your life and running off into the woods with a backpack and a journal. I'm not talking about never compromising or refusing to love people. I'm talking about the opposite, actually. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Choosing yourself means refusing to abandon the one person you're guaranteed to spend your entire life with, you. And maybe you've heard people say, put yourself first, but this is deeper than that. Because choosing yourself isn't a slogan. It's a practice, a muscle, a decision. And I'll be real, I learned that way younger than most people should ever have to. I learned very early that depending on other people to choose me was a recipe for disappointment. I learned that no matter how much I hoped or waited or wished, other people were still living their own lives with their own issues, their own priorities, their own blind spots. And expecting them to prioritize my happiness always led to the same outcome, me being disappointed every single time. Eventually, I realized something that literally changed my life forever. Waiting for other people to choose you is still choosing to not choose yourself. Choosing yourself is emotional self-preservation. It's inner loyalty. It's the moment you stop outsourcing your joy, your time, your desires, your decisions, and your peace to somebody else's availability, mood, or validation. And let me say this clearly, because I know someone listening needs to hear it. You're not required to minimize, pause, wait, or postpone your life just because other people aren't ready to live theirs. The turning point for me wasn't dramatic. It was actually small moments that accumulated into a bigger truth. The day I stopped waiting for someone to be available to go to the restaurant I wanted, I realized dining alone wasn't sad. It was peaceful. The day I couldn't find anyone to go to the movies with me, I just went alone and realized it kind of doesn't make sense to go in groups to a place you're literally supposed to be quiet. The day I stopped waiting for someone to travel with me, I realized I actually enjoy being my own company. The day I stopped asking people if they wanted to do things and just did them, I realized something even more powerful. Joy doesn't need witnesses. It just needs you to give it the okay. And the moment I gave myself that okay, my entire reality shifted. I started trusting my gut even when people disagreed with it. I started listening to my body instead of the crowd. I started being loyal to my wants, my instincts, and my safety. Choosing yourself is a love letter you write to your own life. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about why choosing yourself isn't selfish, how society conditions us to abandon ourselves, how to stop waiting for permission, and how to finally start trusting your inner voice, even when no one else understands it. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. You don't have to justify taking care of yourself. You just have to choose you. Let's get into it. Here's the thing I wish someone told me earlier in life. Your intuition is information, not vibes, not a random feeling, not something you shouldn't make decisions from. Information. Your emotions are signals. Your discomfort is a message. Your hesitation is a form of data. And your boundaries are communication, whether you speak them out loud or not. Most of us were conditioned to ignore this inner intelligence. We were taught to be polite, agreeable, likable, pleasant, accommodating. We learned to override what our body was screaming just so other people wouldn't feel uncomfortable. I used to override red flags all the time. Not because I didn't notice them, but because I didn't feel allowed to honor them. But here's what I've learned through my own life. Your body knows before your brain does. You feel yourself pull back. The vibe shifts. Something feels off. And you don't have a spreadsheet of evidence yet, but your body already knows the truth. And every time you ignore it, a part of you learns not to trust yourself, which is why choosing yourself begins with listening to yourself. And this is so important. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you think you're always right. It means you're willing to trust your internal compass long enough to protect your peace and figure things out. There have been so many moments in my life where I didn't have proof yet, but my gut said no. And every single time I ignored it, I got burned. And every single time I honored it, even if people questioned me, life validated me later. Choosing yourself starts with believing yourself. Your anxiety is information. Your tension is information. Your discomfort is information. And when something feels wrong, when something feels draining, when something feels confusing, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You owe yourself protection. Your inner voice isn't dramatic. It's wise. It's ancient. And it's trying to save you time, energy, and unnecessary pain. So if your body says pause, pause. If your gut says go, go. If your intuition says this doesn't feel right, believe it. Trusting yourself is the first step in choosing yourself. Let's get honest for a second. Most of us didn't wake up one day and decide, you know what I'm gonna do? Betray myself. Self-abandonment doesn't come out of nowhere. It's ingrained in you. Sometimes it even gets rewarded. We learn it through patterns: being easy, being agreeable, being accommodating, being low maintenance. And then one day we wake up exhausted and wonder why we feel invisible in our own life. For a lot of us, this started in childhood. Whether it was a parent who couldn't meet your emotional needs, or a family dynamic where survival meant staying quiet, adaptable, or small, your brain learned that your needs make life harder. So you stopped expressing them, or you minimized them, or you convinced yourself you didn't have any. And that's the origin of people pleasing. It's not personality, it's survival training. When you grow up having to anticipate other people's moods, you learn to prioritize them over yourself. When you grow up being rewarded for being independent or quiet, you learn to never ask for help. When you grow up walking on eggshells, you learn to be responsible for everybody else's comfort. And here's the problem. That childhood survival skill turns into adult self-abandonment. Saying yes when you mean no, letting things slide that bother you, pretending you're fine, apologizing for your preferences, tolerating behavior you should walk away from. And then resentment shows up. Not because you're mean, but because you're tired of abandoning yourself. It's really easy to end up in the same kind of relationship over and over and quietly wonder, why do I keep choosing people who treat my needs like they're optional? Because that pattern feels familiar. Not safe, just familiar. If you once learned you had to earn emotional safety, your body will subconsciously seek people who require earning. So self-abandonment isn't a flaw. It's a trauma response, a loyalty pattern, a learned protective instinct. And choosing yourself becomes your unlearning. Choosing yourself is you becoming the parent you needed. Choosing yourself is you giving yourself permission you never received. Choosing yourself is your nervous system learning a new story. The story that says, I matter, and I don't have to prove it anymore. Let's clear this up right now, because a lot of people get uncomfortable here. Choosing yourself is not the same thing as being selfish. Selfishness harms people. Choosing yourself protects you. Selfishness takes. Choosing yourself prevents you from disappearing. Selfishness says, my needs matter more than yours. Choosing yourself says, my needs matter too. There's a huge difference. One of the biggest lies a lot of us were taught is that being considerate means self-sacrifice. That being loving means putting yourself last. That being a good person means being endlessly available, endlessly giving, endlessly accommodating. But here's the reality. You can honor other people without abandoning yourself. Healthy self-focus isn't just allowed, it's necessary. Because the alternative is resentment. And resentment will quietly destroy every relationship you have, including the one with yourself. People who accuse you of being selfish for choosing yourself are usually the people who benefited when you didn't. When you start setting boundaries, people who never had to consider your needs suddenly have feelings about it. But listen, boundaries aren't punishment. Boundaries are personal responsibility. They protect your peace, your clarity, your emotional safety, your nervous system, your energy, your joy, your life. Choosing yourself isn't about being uncompromising or hard to deal with. You can be kind and firm, empathetic and clear, loving and self-loyal. Choosing yourself sounds like, that doesn't work for me. Actually, I need a night in. I'm not available. I hear you, but my answer is still no. And here's the magic. When you respect your own boundaries, you naturally attract people who respect them too. Here's the part most people don't think about. Every time you wait on someone else, you're actually putting your own life on pause. Waiting feels gentle. Waiting feels patient. Waiting feels reasonable. But most of the time, waiting is actually self-abandonment disguised as politeness. Think about how many experiences we lose because we tell ourselves, I'll go when someone else wants to go. I'll do it when they're free. I don't want to go alone. Maybe next weekend. And before you know it, months go by. Years go by. Opportunities pass. Desires shrink. You start living inside someone else's availability instead of your own. When you rely on other people's schedules, other people's moods, energy, approval, you turn your own happiness into a group project. And suddenly you're negotiating your joy with someone who isn't even qualified to manage it. I learned very young, waiting to be chosen is the fastest path to disappointment. The truth is, no one is responsible for your adventures, your plans, your happiness, your healing, your progress, your joy. They can join you, yes. They can walk beside you, absolutely. But they can't be the thing you're waiting on. And here's something most people don't realize until it's too late. When you don't choose yourself, you start to resent the people you're waiting for. You resent them for not showing up. You resent them for not choosing you. You resent them for not prioritizing you. But you were the one who handed them that power. Choosing yourself removes the resentment. Choosing yourself removes the waiting room energy. Choosing yourself puts your life back in your hands. And that changes everything. Let's talk about what choosing yourself actually looks like in real life, because this isn't theoretical, this is a lifestyle. Choosing yourself isn't always loud. Most of the time, it's microscopic, tiny decisions that protect your peace. And here's the truth I learned the long way. Every time you choose yourself, even in tiny ways, your future expands. That's how self-trust grows. That's how confidence grows. That's how your life becomes your own. And before anyone writes this off as cliche self-care talk, there's actually psychology behind all of this. A lot of self-abandonment starts in childhood. Attachment researchers have talked for decades about how early experiences teach us whether our needs matter. If your feelings were minimized growing up, it makes sense your instinct is to lessen yourself now. That's conditioning, not failure. There's also the codependency research that basically shows what happens when we make each other's emotions more important than our own. That pattern might keep the peace temporarily, but long-term it turns into resentment or burnout, and that's when relationships start to feel heavy instead of supportive. Another thing that really landed for me is how therapists who specialize in boundaries talk about this. Healthy boundaries aren't punishment, they're responsibility. They're how you protect your emotional safety without trying to control anyone else. And intuition isn't whimsy. There's research on self-protective decision-making that shows your body actually picks up signals before your brain logically explains them. Meaning, your inner voice isn't random, it's your internal guidance system. All of this supports the same idea. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's secure, it's protective, it's psychologically healthy. And the more I learned that, the more I realized my body had been trying to tell me this for years. So here's what choosing myself actually looks like in real time. Not in theory, not as some hyper-curated morning routine aesthetic, just real life. I don't wait for permission anymore. If something feels aligned, I move toward it. If it feels wrong, I step back. I used to crowdsource every decision like it was a group project. Do you think I should? Does this seem weird? Will people understand? Now my question is, does this feel true for me? I also stopped relying on other people to validate my happiness. Nothing kills joy faster than needing agreement. I used to be that person who needed someone to say, yes, that's a good idea. Now, if it feels good in my gut and it's not harming anyone, that's my sign. I trust my instinct, even when I can't explain it yet. Some of the biggest choices I've ever made started with zero logic and a tiny whisper of intuition. And every time I followed that whisper, my life expanded. Every time I ignored it, I paid for it later. I listen to my body's signals. If something leaves me feeling heavy or on edge, that's usually a no. If I feel calm, curious, or quietly excited, that's usually a yes. I've learned my intuition is rarely loud, but it's always honest. And maybe the biggest shift, I trust myself with my own life. That doesn't mean I don't take advice or love feedback. It means I don't hand someone else the steering wheel. I'm the one who has to live with my choices, so I'm the one who gets to make them. For me, choosing myself rarely looks dramatic. It's not some eat, pray, love moment. Most of the time, it's tiny micro choices that stack up over time. It looks like ordering what I actually want instead of performing the right choice for the table. It looks like skipping things that drain me even when everyone else is going. It looks like saying no without a 30-minute explanation. It looks like going solo when I want an experience and nobody else is aligned. And honestly, the more I've let my joy lead me, the more I've realized how many things I used to do out of obligation. Choosing myself has made me more authentic in my relationships, not less. Here are a few simple questions I ask myself when I feel that old people-pleasing impulse trying to take the wheel again. Do I want this, or am I trying to avoid disappointing someone? Because those are two very different motivations, and your body can usually tell the difference instantly. Another one. Would I still choose this if no one else existed? If the answer is no, that tells me I'm performing for approval, not choosing for my well-being. And my favorite. Does this feel like a real yes from me? Not a yes on paper, not a yes that looks good to other people, but a yes that feels grounded and right when I picture myself actually doing it. Because your body rarely lies. It's been protecting you since you were a child, long before you had language for any of this. So here's your assignment for the week. Take a second and ask yourself, where have you been abandoning you? Not in huge dramatic ways, but in those tiny choices you barely notice. Saying yes when you're exhausted. Letting other people choose the plan. Hiding what you really want because you don't want to be difficult. Now flip it. Pick one small decision this week where you consciously choose you. Eat what you're craving. Stay in if you want stillness. Say no without softening it with an essay. It doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be yours. I'm calling it the You Do You Boo Challenge. One intentional choice where you stop waiting for someone else and pick yourself instead. And trust me, that's where real confidence begins. Here's the truth I want you to really take in before this episode ends. Most of us are never directly taught how to choose ourselves. We're taught how to sacrifice, how to accommodate, how to apologize for having needs at all. We're raised to think love means putting ourselves last, especially if our early environment rewarded that. But the secret I had to learn the hard way is this. If you don't choose yourself, you spend your life waiting for someone else to do it, waiting for someone to notice you, waiting for permission, waiting for validation, waiting for a moment that never comes. And meanwhile, your actual life is happening. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't care about people. It doesn't mean you're shutting the world out or suddenly deciding to live some cold, hyper-independent existence. It means you've finally decided not to abandon the one person you actually have a lifetime contract with, yourself. And listen, choosing yourself doesn't always look glamorous at first. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like being misunderstood. Sometimes it looks like disappointing the very people who benefited most from you abandoning yourself in the first place. But on the other side, that's where peace lives. That's where confidence comes from. That's where authentic relationships even become possible. Because here's something nobody tells you. You cannot be deeply connected to other people if you have no connection to yourself. And part of that connection is learning how to actually enjoy your own company. Because if you can't sit with yourself, why would anyone else want to sit with you? When you finally stop begging life to choose you and choose yourself instead, you start operating from a completely different emotional frequency. You feel safer inside your own skin. You feel calmer with your own decisions. You stop chasing things that don't actually want you. You start creating your life instead of waiting for someone else to invite you into theirs. And the most beautiful part, when you choose yourself, you give others permission to choose themselves too. You become living proof that we don't have to minimize to belong. We don't have to sacrifice ourselves to be loved. We don't have to lose who we are just to keep the peace. You become your own home, your own anchor, your own source of validation, your own emotional parent, your own partner. Not because you don't want connection, but because you finally learned you don't have to collapse yourself in order to have it. You deserve a life where your needs matter. You deserve relationships where your boundaries are respected. You deserve emotional environments that honor who you are. And honestly, you deserve to be chosen, especially by yourself. So here's my ask for you this week. Notice every tiny moment where you have an opportunity to choose yourself. Notice the instinct that says, maybe I shouldn't. And gently ask yourself, who taught me that? Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is be real. Real about what you actually want. Real about what you feel. Real about choosing yourself, even when the world hasn't yet. I'm Ram, and thanks for getting real with me today. You just finished listening to I Mean This in the Nicest Way Possible, written and produced by Richard Armand Mills.